Today we're going to look at extending the functionality of a Watson Assistant based solution using webhooks. I'll cover three different patterns. One is accessing an outside service directly, like a translation service or possibly an image recognition service. The second will be calling a custom application that runs some logic and calls other services. And here you can start to see the seeds of microservices capabilities. And the third will be calling custom applications that access a backend database. This is a very common pattern. In this case, I'll be using a database on the IBM cloud, but it's a proxy for your database behind your firewall. Before I launch into all this, what is a webhook? A webhook is the mechanism that allows you to call out to an external program from Watson Assistant based on events in your dialog. That means you have complete control over the triggering and conditions by which the webhook gets invoked. If you combine that with cloud functions, which are serverless and not running when they're not in use, you can create capabilities that are extremely austere from a cost standpoint. Now, you don't have to use cloud functions. These webhooks can reach out to any URL you define with the post request. We will be using cloud functions in this case because it's all integrated on the IBM cloud. The flow is relatively simple. Watson Assistant collects data from the session as context variables, and then it'll pass those variables to the target URL when the webhook is invoked. That target URL or listener will perform whatever action it needs to and respond or not accordingly. There are plenty of videos that'll walk you through how to set it up. I'm going to focus on demoing the functionality. If you're interested in the how, look at the links in the video notes. Let's get started. This skill performs a simple translation by calling a translation service, but the service could be doing any kind of work, from leveraging an algorithm involving a credit score, to looking up an account balance or weather data, accessing flight times, to just retrieving a list of movies. Any service that is accessible via a web API. I'm using translation just to show the simple pattern of connecting your chatbot or virtual agent directly to a service. To get a feel for how to configure this webhook, we really need to look at the service API itself. Here we are in the language translator API docs. If I scroll down to the translation method, I see the 5 parameters needed to successfully make a language translation request. So we have the service URL where we are sending the request. We have the API key, which is security to give us access to the service. The origin language and the target language. What are we translating from and to? And then, of course, there's the actual text to translate. Back in our skill, these are simply entered into their proper places. I've already configured the webhook, so let's test it out. I'm going to do that from within the skill using the Try It Out panel. My dog just had an operation and is thirsty. Can I give him water? We can see that the webhook successfully called out to the translation service, and the translation service responded. Mi perro acaba de tener una operación y tiene sed. ¿Puedo darle agua? So how did we do it? Remember those 5 parameters the documentation said were needed? If we go to the webhook configuration page, we see the service URL was entered here, and the API key goes here. Also, if we go to the dialog, and we enter into the node that calls the translation service, we see that the from and to language targets are here. This represents English to Espanol, or to Spanish, and the actual input text is saved as a variable that I have named text. We'll pass these 2 key value pairs to the URL that was configured in the webhook configuration. And that's it essentially. Match the needs of the listening service with the parameters you pass via the webhook, and we have successfully added a powerful capability to our virtual agent. We've done it quickly and in a way that keeps our virtual agent decoupled from the language translation service. If we ever want to change services, we just modify those 5 parameters to match the new service's requirements, and we're done. The last pattern was about linking to an existing service managed by somebody else. In this example, we'll look at connecting your conversational service to custom code that you built. At its core, this is no different than connecting to some other managed service, except that you get to determine the required input parameters. As before, this code could be any application. It could be a security application that validates users, or an email program that interfaces with an existing ticketing system. The key is we're showing the ability to connect your virtual assistant to assets your company either has or may have backlogged. In the last example, we had to pass the 5 parameters that the listener service needed. In this case, since we control the code, it's up to us to determine the inputs. I put this script into an IBM Cloud Function because I can expose it with an API, a web API. You could put this in any application as long as you're able to access it through an HTTP call. This particular action will call either a joke or a cat fact. And here is my custom code. It's a Node.js application. It looks for a parameter which we have called action. In this case, the app will respond differently to 2 different action values. If action equals joke, it will tell a joke. And if action equals fact, it will tell a fact. I could have just hard-coded some of the facts and jokes in here, but we're actually using this app to orchestrate 2 other services at these endpoints, and they'll provide the content. This is simplex, just to illustrate the point. It could, of course, be thousands of lines of code that responds uniquely to a myriad of inputs, but I wanted you to see how simple the connectivity is. You can see here the actual endpoints get published in various different formats depending on the type of security that I'm interested in. So let's give it a shot. Here we are, back in our Watson Assistant, and as before, we'll test it in the try it out panel. The dialog is going to offer up 2 options, either cat fact or Norris joke. Depending on which one of these we select, it's going to then assign the correct parameter, which it'll pass to the script via the webhook. Press cat fact. A queen female cat can begin mating when she is between 5 and 9 months. And of course, I can also do the Norris joke if I need to. Norris doesn't do burn down charts. He does. So okay, the Norris jokes are much worse than the cat facts. I think the other interesting thing is to look at what we've done here. Again, in the last example, we had to pass 5 different parameters because that's what the listening URL required. In this particular case, the application only requires 1 parameter input. And so we've created here 2 different dialog nodes, one for each particular value of the action. So if the action is joke, then we set the key value pair action to joke, and we pass that through to the webhook, and it gives us the joke response. If the action value is fact, then we pass that and get the appropriate response. It's a very simple setup. You could actually accomplish the same thing with 1 node by parameterizing this value, but for simplicity's sake, I've kept the nodes discrete just so that we can see better what's actually happening. So that's it. Very simply, we're able to take our conversational tool and connect to our own custom code. We're able to define the inputs that our code requires and pass them simply through the webhook configuration. This is the pattern that gets used time and time again when somebody wants to extend the capability of their conversational service with capabilities that they've built in-house and exposed through a webhook.